It's my honor to introduce Jim Hailey. It's not easy taking a speech that you would have done in class and converting it into something that you're going to do over a webinar. And Jim has done that. So I'm thankful that he was able to do that. And we've also got our June speaker prepared to do a webinar with us already as well. Jim has been an avid birder for the past 30 years. During those years, he has served as a trip leader for the Texas Ornithological Society to Alaska, Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Texas, and Minnesota. He is a native Texan born in Corpus Christi, where he lived his entire adult working life. He spent 10 years on his ranch in Duval County, where he organized the Monte Mucho Audubon Society. He served as its president for 7 years and organized the first Laredo Birding Festival in 2006. He has since participated annually as a guide or speaker at the festival. He moved to Georgetown in 2009, where he organized the Williamson Audubon Group and served on its board for several years. He also served on the original steering committee for the Goodwater chapter of the Texas Master Naturalists. He is a past president of the Texas Ornithological Society. Over the past 30 years, he has had the opportunity and good fortune to bird 6 continents. So I'd like to introduce Jim Hailey, fellow master naturalist.
How's that?
That's great.
Okay. I want to be sure you were able to see what's going on. Well, welcome everybody. Kind of unusual to have this kind of a meeting after all these years. A couple of things I miss about our regular meetings is we don't have face-to-face contact, so I can't visit with you. And the second thing is I don't get any brownies. But other than that, I guess this thing is going to work okay. If you can hear me all right, I want to be sure that everybody's here. The topic tonight I'm going to talk about is birding Texas, and it came out of the fact that in 2019, my wife Deb and I did a big year in Texas. For those of you who are not familiar with big years, that is try to see as many birds in a particular area within an annual year, January to December. And we did that in Texas, traveling 27,000 miles and spending 200 nights out. So I thought I would bring to the group here some things we learned, some things I learned particularly, I mean, even having birded for the last 30 years. Texas is a pretty big state. You all know that. I've put up on there a map. It's kind of a representation of the various regions that are particularly effective for birding, like the South Texas plains or the Big Bend country. They have some specific birds that inhabit those areas that don't particularly inhabit others, as we're going to see here as we go along. So anyway, as you can see, I think it's 800 and some odd miles from Beaumont to El Paso, and it was 753 miles, I believe it was, from the Panhandle to Brownsville. So you got a lot of area to cover. The Texas Record Birds Committee, which is part of the Texas Ornithological Society, in September of 2019 recognized that Texas has 652 species of birds that have been found within the state that they recognize. Now, there's some other ones that are pending recognition, but at this point, there's only 652. I say only 652. California has 670 and Florida has less than us. We're the second most birdie state in the union. Back in 1990s, a couple of birders by the name of Roe Wauer, who was at one point superintendent of Big Bend, and Mark Ellwanger, a fellow birder of his, published a book that in the late 1990s with the following facts, and I thought this is something that we should look at. Texas has 30 species of birds which can be considered specialties, and by that I mean they're not going to be seen anywhere else in the they're not going to be seen anywhere else in the American Birding Association area which today is from the Rio Grande north to Alaska, and it now includes the Hawaiian Islands. That's the area that ABA considers within their region. I think there should be one other now added to that, and that's the Aplomado falcon, which was reintroduced down at Laguna Atascosa several years ago and has since flourished. It used to be a common bird in the Big Bend area, but it has disappeared over periods of time because of habitat loss. And actually, great horned owls are their enemies. In addition to those 30 or 31 species that I recognize there's another 50 that are considered high profile or high specialty birds that people want to find that are more difficult to find in Texas, but can be found there. So we're looking at a total of 81 target species for the state. Now, that leaves 575. That means that you can see those pretty much in most other places, not in any one specific area, but generally across the nation, across the state. So here are some of the 30 specialties. I'm not going to read those because we're going to look at them one at a time, but the 30 special birds that are limited basically to Texas. You're not going to find these any other state in the union. Then we have the 50 birds, which the other 50 species, which can be found in other areas, but they're also be able to be found here in Texas, and are kind of target birds for most birders. If you're a birder, most of these, like an elf owl or a Mexican jay or paddock tanagers, those you're gonna be looking for. So if you were to go birding in Texas and you wanted to see as many as you could as quickly as you could, there's one region where you can go that will get 70% of those species, including the high profile species. And that is down in region 11, which is basically a line, if you drew it from the Aransas Wildlife Refuge north, that area straight across South Texas, you could find all of those birds within that region and in the right habitat at the right time of year. So region 11 there is the place to go if you're a new birder and you want to catch the specialties, or if you're an old birder and don't have them all, this old time birder, this is a great place to go, the Rio Grande Valley and South Texas brushland. Region 10, which is the Trans-Pecos area or the Big Bend area, is an area where you can get another 15% of the specialty birds. And then the final regions 1, 5, 6, and 7 provide us with the last 15%. So you can see that 85% of the species that are most sought after in Texas can be found within 2 regions of the state, which is pretty interesting. The birds of the South Texas region, there are 31 Texas specialties since I added that Aplomado falcon that can be found there. Of the 31 that are in that region, 28 of them are found south of that line that's drawn across there. The only specialties not found there are the black-capped vireo, the golden cheek warbler, which are in our hill country area, or the Colima warbler and the Lucifer hummingbird, which are out in the Big Bend area. But so 28 of the 31 can be found by just heading down to the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. So let's look at what we're looking at here. This is a least grebe. This is a small grebe. Its best characteristic to look for is that bright yellow eye that it has there. It's found on shallow ponds and in marshes along the river. It's a year-round species in Texas. I mean, you can find it at any of those sites there down in the Rio Grande Valley, like Santa Ana or Estero Ladron Grande State Park. Most places in inland, even I used to have them on my ranch in Riolitos, Texas, in Duval County. So this species has expanded its range quite a bit in the last few years. In the last 30 years since I've been birding, this bird I never would see beyond Corpus Christi. That would be, you wouldn't expect one. Now they sometimes show up even in our area. So the birds are moving their range north, probably due to climate change, to warmer temperatures. Second species that is found in this area in the South Texas is the Muscovy duck, and this is the only place in the AB area where you could expect to see a Muscovy. Now you can see a lot of Muscovy ducks that are hybrids, domestic ones at just almost any pond, but to be a true tropical Muscovy duck, it has to be a bird with white wing patch, very dark, and it doesn't have that red facial blotching and that you see on the domestic ones that we have in the area. About the only place I have ever found this bird is at Salinino in the river down there. At Falcon Dam, there's occasionally. There's a few private ranches and private property in Zapata and Starr County that the Monte Mucho Audubon Society has started a project putting up nests. These birds nest in cavities, so they put up nest boxes at some ranches, and we did have some success there. Last year at the Rio Grande Birding Festival, at the Laredo Birding Festival, we were able to see some on a private ranch, but that area has been since shut down to public access, so it's really difficult. I have seen them on a ranch north of Laredo in the past, but this is a very difficult bird to find anywhere in the United States. In South America and Mexico, they're pretty common, but up here they're not. The third of our 28 is the hookbill kite. This bird eats snails, tree snails, and it is only found in the lower Rio Grande Valley along the river for the most part, limited to the river area. You can see it at Santa Ana occasionally. To me, the best place has always been Anzaldúa County Park down south of Mission, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. It is a bird of the tropics. It's again south down into Mexico. It's not as difficult to find. It's a more common bird down there. So that's another one that you're going to be able to see down there. Very pretty bird. White-tailed hawk is one of those specialties. Now this one extends quite a bit farther north. We can see this all the way up into Colorado County, but it's primarily a coastal bird. It likes the open prairies. It's got a beautiful, when it's an adult, it has a beautiful white tail when it's soaring above you. It's just spectacular. Got that nice little brown wing patch when he's setting. We had some of these at the Atwater Prairie Chicken. I think that's where I took this picture last year up in Colorado County. But it is a specialty down of South Texas, particularly in the Rio Grande Valley. If they're burning sugarcane, these birds are all over it because the mice are running, and that's what they feed on primarily. Another specialty down there is the chachalaca, and if he's around, you know he's there because they're a loud, gregarious bird. They're in huge flocks. Many years ago, they used to allow camping at Benson Rio Grande State Park, and in the wintertime, it would be ringed with people with bird feeders everywhere. It was a great birding place, and I'm very unhappy that they've done what they've done, but they have done what they've done and shut that down. But used to, when you would camp there, first daylight, you were going to get up because there would be 500 of these birds making their noise, and they are loud when they make their noise. They're a large chicken-like bird. They do range from the Rio Grande down along the Rio Grande River from Brownsville all the way up. We have them in Laredo, Texas, up that way now. And I think there's a few even extending farther up the river than that. If you go to Santa Ana or if you go to Santa Ana, they're probably walking around at the feeder right there at the entrance when you walk in. Or if you go to Estero Grande State Park in Westico, they're going to be at the feeder there. So all you have to do is sit and wait, and that bird will show up for you. But it's kind of an interesting bird. Okay, everybody's heard of the whooping crane. When they started out, I think there was 110 or 20 species left. There are a little over 300 of them now. This bird winters in Texas at at Aransas National Wildlife Refuge, just north of Rockport. It lives in the brackish marshes and tidal flats of that National Wildlife Refuge. This picture here, you got an adult and a juvenile. That's a first-year bird that flew down. I understand there's a little over 300 there this year, so they're making a comeback slowly, but they are surviving. This is the only place in the United States you can see them. Well, you can't get to it in Canada because the reserve where they raise their chicks are not do not allow public access. So if you want to see a whooping crane, you got to go down to Rockport. The best way to do that is to either go with a group that we sometimes put on with master naturalists, and either that or go down there and catch one of those boats that goes back in there, and it'll take you up pretty close. You can get really close to these birds. And they're huge, beautiful, massive birds. Another of the specialties is a red-billed pigeon. Now this is a fruit-eating pigeon that we find only along the Rio Grande River from, I would say, Laredo. We know where they are now, south to probably Salanino, maybe some in Zapata County. But this is a pigeon that is a Mexican species that about the only time it shows up is it winters sometimes along the Rio Grande River and comes up into Texas. There's a public golf course in Laredo, Texas called the Max Golf Course, and you go out there and you can usually early in the morning find these pigeons in the trees on hole 9, either across the river or on this side of the river, where they spent the night. And that's the easiest place to find them. Many years ago, you could find them in Salanino and then Zapata, but I haven't seen one there in a long time. In Salanino, it's usually just a flyover as they fly up the river in the morning. The white-tipped dove, which is a South Texas specialty, it covers more than just the Rio Grande River. It goes all the way up into the brush country. I used to have them on my ranch in Hebronville in Duval County. And it is if you think about blowing over a Coke bottle, the sound that makes, you'll hear this bird. It's a moan. It sounds very sad, something going on back in the bush. They're pretty reclusive, though if you go to Cerro Ladon Grande and go to the feeder, you'll probably see them walking around there. They will show up to get free food. They like the thorn forest and the riparian areas, particularly. That's their basic habitat. Something that is kind of a Texas specialty, but I have seen these in Florida. But this is a native population, probably intermixed with some of the released birds that have developed along from Brownsville all the way up to, we even have them in Laredo now. Pretty good sized groups. If you go to Olivera Park and Brownsville at just before dark, they'll come in by probably 300 or 400 of them will come in. A mixed group of parrots, but the red crowns will be among them, probably the most common of them. This picture I think I took, this year I took down in Weslaco one morning as we were going out to Cerro Ladon Grande. They flew into behind a strip center there, and I went in the back and he was there chowing down on some cactus. There's also in this area with them usually some lilac-crowned parrots and some yellow-headed parrots that you can pick out. Those are not accepted at this point by the Texas Records Bird Committee as resident established populations. Probably will be soon. Then we have green parakeets. There's huge flocks of them down in the Rio Grande Valley from Brownsville all the way up. And Laredo, when we have the Laredo Birding Festival in February, if you go down to the Washington Street to where the Laredo Independent School District offices are, there's the old building down there that's got holes in the soffit, and these birds come in to overnight there. So you can go down there and see the green parakeets. Now there's even become a small group of monk parakeets that are with them. Little monks can be seen here in Austin area, in Georgetown area, just randomly you run into them. One of the real specialties of South Texas, and one that's very, very difficult to get, is the ferruginous pygmy owl. Now this is a small owl that lives in thorn forest and oak knots, and about the only place that is reliable now is on private property. Many years ago, below Falcon Dam, if you walk down to Boy Scout Woods, you could probably find a pair, but now you just about have to go to private ranch. And the best one, we took a master naturalist trip there a couple of years ago to with the King Ranch down to the Norris Division, just north of Raymondville, and that's where you can find this bird. A cute little bird. He is a diurnal hunter, so he's not hiding it during the daytime. Common paraki, a very interesting bird. This is a nightjar, feeds at night, feeds on insects, primarily moths. I used to, when Benson Park was open, in the evening after sunset, you could ride the roads and you'd see bunches of them, because they would come to the pavement, because the pavement still had heat, and the moths would go there to warm up, and they would be flying along there to feed on them. Currently, an easy place to see this bird is the Cerro Llano Grande State Park in Weslaco. There's been, for at least the last 4 years, maybe 5 years, there have been 2 of them that could be seen, one in the primitive area and one in the other area. And the park rangers know exactly where they are. But this guy's just laying there in the bush right off the trail. You can see him really clear in that picture there, but when you're out there in the field, it's really difficult to find this bird. Buff-bellied hummingbird is a South Texas specialty. This bird ranges pretty much all the way up into the Victoria area, but it's really, principal area is the Rio Grande Valley. Go to Cerro Llano Grande, go to their hummingbird feeders by the restrooms, and just sit there, and they'll be coming in. Or you can go to the park in Edinburgh, at the sewer treatment plant, and they're there too. So they're not a hard bird to find, but they're a very beautiful bird. That iridescent green and that buff belly, bright rufous tail, and the distinguishing characteristic is that bill, which is kind of orangey with a black tip, but a very pretty bird. The ringed kingfisher. This is a South Texas specialty. This is the largest of our U.S. kingfishers. It is found along the Rio Grande. You can find it anywhere from Brownsville to Laredo and above. We even had some, we have some getting up into Uvalde now on the Frio River. I have a cabin there, and I've seen them on the Frio there. And they're extending their range as well as the climate warms. But a real easy place to see them is in Laredo, to go down to the trail, Chicon Creek Trail, go down to the river and sit there for a while. And sure, if you sit there long enough, all 3 kingfishers will fly by. This one, the green, the ringed, and the belted, our three kingfishers. Now this is the smallest of our kingfishers. The green kingfisher is also the same area along the Rio Grande. It does get up into the hill country. It is expanding its range to some degree. Pretty little bird. Very, very, very interesting to watch him fish. I've watched him fish off of everything from a limb to a basket, a HEB basket dumped over in the creek. So, golden-fronted woodpecker is a South Texas specialty. The red-bellied we have here is not especially in Texas, because this bird can be seen all the way to Georgia, all up in other areas of the country. But the golden-fronted woodpecker, which is a more western species, is found in South Texas along the Rio Grande. It also goes all the way out into like Llano State Park and out west. Some of them now even getting up into the Panhandle area. So but it's a western, is a drier habitat. It likes that Tamaulipan scrub as opposed to the red bellies, who are more like the deciduous trees and the pine trees. So it's a very different, it has a very different feeding habit or feeding regimen, because it doesn't have the heavy trees to deal with. It's more of a mesquite or hunter. Great Kiskadee. You can't go to the valley without hearing the great Kiskadee. I mean, he is saying Kiskadee all the time. They're easy to see at Santa Ana, Salanino, Llano Grande, anywhere along that river, all the way up to Laredo. We had a pair here a couple of years out at Berry Springs Park, which was quite unusual. And they have since disappeared and didn't come back. So they are expanding their range a bit too. I see reports occasionally of them way up in this area. The Couch's kingbird is a South Texas specialty. It's found down there in the Rio Grande River Valley, all the way out into the Big Bend. It is, again, one of those flycatchers that kind of likes a dry desert type scrub brush type habitat. We have a cousin of that, which is not exclusively in Texas, because you can see them in Arizona and New Mexico, is the tropical kingbird. And if you were just to have the two sitting side by side and you looked at them, I mean, maybe you can, but I cannot tell the two. The only way that you can tell the difference between them, the two, is by their call. And their calls are totally different and very distinct. So when you see these down in the valley, you have to be careful if you're calling it a Couch's, that you have heard it call a Couch's call instead of the tropical call. Definitely the Couch's are much more prevalent, so 98% of the time you're going to be right in that call. One of my favorite birds, when I lived at the ranch, I used to have them in the yard all the time, is the green jay. This is an absolutely spectacular looking bird. Dark black blue face and mask, the lighter blue patch on his cheeks and his nape, and then the green and the yellow in the tail. I mean, this bird, when it flies, you know what it is. And it is also a very raucous bird. It can make a lot of noise when it's around. But that is a bird. Don't think I know of any reported up in Williamson County. They do get farther up into Uvalde and some of the western drier hill country area. But certainly one of the birds that people come from all over the world to see, because it is a really pretty bird. Now this bird, sad to say, is basically not available in Texas any longer. It's a very big jay. Back in the 90s and the early first 10 years of 2000, there was a group that were living on the Mexican, they're in Mexico, but they're disappearing over there too. I think they're pretty much an endangered species. They would come across into a place in Chapeno, which is a little town like Salanino, it's just downriver from Falcon Dam. And there's a campground parking a place there that used to encourage them by putting out food in the mornings, and the jays would come in and you could go there. I haven't seen one of these birds probably in the last 8-10 years, but I used to see them regularly at Chapeno up until then. But evidently that population has died off or not showing back up across on this side of the river. It's been years since they've seen any on the U.S. side of the Rio Grande. Another really unusual specialty down there in the valley is a Mexican species that About the only place I know you can see this bird is if you go to the dump in Brownsville, Texas. Although last year, when we were doing our big year, we were traveling from where we were staying on South Padre Island over towards Brownsville, and we were on the road that went by the dump, and a pair just by accident flew in front of us and landed on a fence post right there, adjacent to the highway, which was very lucky because I did not really expect that we were going to be able to find that bird last year. It's a really difficult one to find. It's really hit and miss. Now the clay-colored thrush, or used to be called clay-colored robin, but they've changed it to it is a thrush. A robin is a thrush, and it is a South Texas specialty, basically along the Rio Grande again, Salinino, Chapeno, Estero Llano Grande, Benson, up to Slaughter Park in Laredo and other places in Laredo. You can find this. Father McNaby Park in Laredo, you can find this bird. Out at the Max Golf Course, you can find this bird. So it is expanding too. It is a Mexican species primarily that has come across and established itself in South Texas. Long-billed thrasher. This is one of my favorite South Texas birds. They're very secretive. They like really thick brush. They like to get back in there. You can hear them making their little call, their little chuck, but you can't find them until maybe by accident they move and you see where they are. But this is a gray, grayback, brown wing bars, and it's got that really heavy black streaking. There's another thrasher, the curve-billed thrasher, which is very similar, that is in South Texas as well, but the streaking on it is much more diffuse and brown, not black. Other than that, it's pretty difficult to tell them apart except by call. But if you see that really thick black streak, heavy dark streaking, you can be assured it's going to be a long-billed thrasher. Tropical parula. This bird can be found in the valley occasionally at in Weslaco, at Audubon refuge there. Sometimes at Estero Llano Grande in Santa Ana, but an easy place to find this is when you go to see the owl, Ferruginous pygmy owl on the King Ranch. Tom Langshot and his group know exactly where these birds are, and we found one really easily the time we were there with the Goodwater group back a couple of years ago. But this is a tropical parula. It's different than the northern parula, which we frequently see in Texas and all the way up to the United States. So you have to, if you really want to, for sure want to get this bird, the easiest place to go is the King Ranch Northwest Division. Take one of those trips. Olive sparrow is a South Texas bird. This is a ground sparrow that you generally see or find by hearing them scratching the leaves, because they're in the leaves scratching, looking for bugs or whatever they can find to eat. They're a small sparrow with that brownish cap, eyeline, and that greenish wings and tail. In the springtime, you can hear them. Their song is like, think of a bouncing ball as the way it makes their sound. It sounds that way. This was a really big time South Texas specialty. My first experience with this bird took me about 3 months to see it standing and freezing myself to death behind the library in Zapata, Texas. It was a couple there that would show up, but you really had difficulty in seeing them. Now, since I moved to the ranch and we started the Monte Mucho Audubon there, and we've had all this years of experience of going out, we could find these birds pretty easily in Laredo. Probably the easiest place in the United States to find this bird is Laredo, Texas. And probably the easiest place in Laredo, Texas is either down along the river at Zacate Creek or out at the Max Golf Course north up Old Mines Road. But it is a bird of the river. It likes the Carrizo cane. It it's really difficult to find. I generally have to play a tape to get it to come out, but occasionally you just look upon one. Now here we get to the orioles, which are really special down there. The Altamira oriole, which is that really pretty bright orange with that black throat. Now the hooded oriole looks very similar, and the difficulty is figuring out. You see, if you look at that bird on the wing patch on the right, on either the right or the left, you see it's got an orange wing patch right there on that tip of that wing. That's a mark that will distinguish it from the other one, which has a really white wing bar and not that orange patch. But these birds are found in Santa Ana, in Estero Grande, anywhere along that river down from Brownsville all the way up to, well, if you go to Saladino and you go down to the river where the people have the feeding station, you can sit there in a chair and watch these guys come in for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, however long you want to sit there. That's a great place to go at Saladino there to that that feeding station, because you get three orioles usually, all three of them, Texas oriole. Now, this one I added is the Aplomado falcon. The reason I added this, even though it wasn't in the original list that Rowe and Elwanger put out, was because it has been introduced and it has expanded. We have them from Matagorda Island. There's a pair that are nesting right now on Mustang Island at Port Aransas, just north of the state park there. On the inland side, there's what they call there's a place where they can raise their young. So there's a pair breeding there. Down in the valley, they're showing up in various places besides Laguna Atascosa now. So it has been a successful program. I thought I had one many years ago in Duval County. And when the people from Atascosa came up to talk to me about it, I asked them if we could put in a hacking station and put some out on the ranch. And they said, no, it's not, because their biggest enemy is great horned owls. You got too many great horned owls. They won't last a week. The other oriole down there is the Audubon's oriole. This is that black-headed, yellow, for the most part, rest of its body, that is specific to South Texas as far as being in the United States. This bird has a whistle call that you will hear when you're down there, and he likes to be along the river as well. I see him in Laredo. I see him at Benson. I see him at Santa Ana. So pretty common bird down there. Much more common, though, north of Mission, up the river, as I like to call it. So that's the specialty birds that are found in South Texas if you want to go birding and get 70% of the specialty birds of Texas. You go down to the Rio Grande Valley. Now, these are the other ones that are sought after and you can find also in the Rio Grande Valley. And we'll look at some of those. But I want to point out those rarities. Besides all of that, occasionally you have things like blue bunting come across the river, or golden crowned warbler, which we had down there last year. Or 10 years ago, we had an Amazon kingfisher show up in Laredo. And then 2 years later, one showed up in Cameron County. Roadside hawk was there this year. Crimson collar grosbeak was there down in the valley this year. Years ago, I've seen masked ducks and green-breasted mangoes that we missed this year that showed up for one day. Black-vented oriole, sulfur-bellied flycatcher, white-throated robin, blue mockingbird, gray-crowned yellowthroat. These are all Mexican species that come across the river occasionally or come from other places that are way out of range of where they should be. And you can't count on those to be there, but occasionally they'll show up. And if you watch the listservs, you'll know when they're around. So here are some of the birds that are specialties that we find down in the Rio Grande River, South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley as well. The wood stork, this bird is primarily seen in the wintertime in Texas. It's what they call post-dispersal, or after they've bred, some of the young ones will disperse and they come up here into Texas. It's a large stork. This one I think I found in Palacios or somewhere up that way. Harris's hawk, one of my favorites. This is really a very pretty hawk. He is really chocolatey brown. He has that white band and the undertail, and it wraps around, and then he's got a real pretty light chocolate mark on his shoulder. He's a really South Texas specialty. You start seeing them usually by the time you get to Corpus and you head south. You'll start seeing them show up on the power lines on either 281 or 77. This is not limited to the valley. You can see this in Big Bend as well, but it is a gray hawk, and you can see this pretty easily out in the morning as well at the Max Golf Course in Laredo. You can also see it along Salanino down at the river. It's not an uncommon bird, but it is really, really difficult to be in the right place at the right time for that bird. The monk parakeet I mentioned, they're down there now. They're in Houston, they're in Austin, they're in Dallas. These are probably escapees. These are probably escapees in the valley too. They're probably not coming from somewhere, somebody's collection. Groove-bill Ani, this is a kind of a difficult bird to find. He's usually not there until spring, until fall. Sometimes you find them in the summer. I have found them. I think this particular one was, I think it was down at Edinburgh area, but kind of an interesting looking bird, and they're usually kind of secretive and hunker down back in the bush. So you got to kind of pish them out, and that is pish them. The northern beardless tranulate is another one of those birds that you can get on that King Ranch tour that's also found at Santa Ana. It's also found at Estero Llano Grande, but it's almost a guarantee when you go in the Norias division to find that bird. Oh, this bird, this is my favorite bird of all birds in Texas right here. There was a doctor in Falfurrias that was a big birder, and he was trained by Connie Hager, and he called this bird La Embercita del Fuego, the little ember of fire. And I think that's an extremely good description of it. I mean, used to have those breed at the ranch. They would spend the summer there on the fences at the back porch. I used to watch them for hours. Beautiful bird. You can't miss them. Tropical kingbird I mentioned earlier, so we won't spend much time on that. Rose-throated Becard. This is another specialty that comes across the river. It shows up sometimes in Santa Ana. Is primarily that best place to see that bird. That's where I see it reported most, or maybe sometimes over at Sable Palms. But it also is a bird of Arizona that comes into the Arizona area over there. It needs that Spanish moss because that's what it builds its nest out of. Chihuahuan raven. This is a common bird in Laredo. Interestingly, the Chihuahuan Desert is in Big Bend, right? It's very unusual in Big Bend. It's the common raven is more common in Big Bend than the Chihuahuan raven in the Chihuahuan Desert. But this bird is pretty easily found in Laredo because there's literally thousands of them out at the dump in Laredo, Texas. Easiest thing, besides the call is a much lower, gravelier call than the common raven. But in the wind, the feathers under their throat, you'll see white in them when the wind is blowing them. Black-tailed gnatcatcher. This is a South Texas bird. It's also found in Arizona. I find it usually down in the Laredo area at the private ranches that we were able to go on to. Every year I find at least one, maybe two down there. cute little bird. It's got that really black cap on that white throat. Pyraluxia, found these in Arizona as well, but one of my favorite birds too. It's just in the spring when they get their breeding plumage, they're just spectacularly pretty. Their call is totally different from cardinal, and once you learn that call, you won't have any problem finding it. Painted bunting. I know no one likes this bird, so we'll just skip on by it. Actually, this was the bird that got me into birding. So, I mean, if you've seen it, you're aware. I mean, it's a masterpiece of painting. And we do have them here in Williamson County. And I've seen them at the blind a couple of times out at Garrett Park when I was there. So they come into the blind to the water in the summertime. They come here in the summer. They go back south in the winter. They're a migratory bird, but really a pretty one. Pottery sparrow. The only place I know to reliably find this bird in Texas is again on that Norris Division King Ranch strip, and you need to go late in April, after the 20th, because they don't show back up until about that time. And last 2 years ago when we went, this bird did show up for us, and that was the bird that I was really looking for because I knew we were going to find the other ones, but this one was one that I'd hoped for, and it turned out we got it there. Pretty far off when I took this picture, probably 75 yards, maybe, yeah, 75 yards. You can see how grainy it is. Bronze cowbird is a South Texas specialty. If you've ever seen this bird, that bright orange eye sticks out, but it's really interesting. Their mating, they'll hover. They just hover above and try to hover around the female as they follow her around. Okay, so now we're going to get out of South Texas and we're going to head to West Texas, or to the Trans-Pecos. Once you cross the Pecos River out near Fort Stockton, you're in the Trans-Pecos, which has Big Bend. It has Guadalupe Mountains National Park. It has El Paso. So that whole region out there. Remember that this is home to two of the specialties, the Lucifer hummingbird and the Colima warbler. Now, the Lucifer's hummingbird has got this bright purple throat. You can find him in the Chisos Mountains, that's Big Bend, the Davis Mountains out at Fort Davis, and the Christmas Mountains. There's a lady out there by the name of Carolyn Owl who has this place called Christmas Mountain Oasis that you contact her and she'd love to have you out there. It's really rough getting there. Just be prepared for some off-road driving to get to her place. But once you get there, she has feeders set up, and it's almost without, if it's the right time of year, you're going to find Lucifer hummingbird. So Big Bend, Davis Mountains, Carol Oaks, Desert Oasis, great places to go. The Colima warbler, I've seen that bird several times. I'm too old to do the hike. It's a 12-hour trek up the mountain to Boot Canyon and then around and back down. I mean, literally, it takes all day to do it. You leave before light and you get back at dusk. Spring and summer, they come in about the end of March. Sometimes, if you're lucky, when they're at the end of the summer, up in August, when you think you wouldn't want to go to Big Bend. By the way, the first time I went to Big Bend, I nearly froze to death August the 1st. It was raining and cold up in the mountains. This bird is a specialty that the only place in north of the Rio Grande you will find this bird is at Big Bend and up on the trail to Boot Canyon. So be prepared if you want to go look for it. Okay, some additional species that you find out there. This last year when we were out there, we were particularly looking for Montezuma quail. We didn't find one after days and days of looking for it. We did find the gamel scale quail pretty easy. We did find a juniper titmouse. We did have alfowl and western screech owl. So we were really kind of lucky in that. We spent, I don't know, 3 times out there, and either in Guadalupe Mountains or Hudspeth County at Waco Tanks Campground or at Big Bend to find these birds. This is a common black hawk. It's a specialty down there. They have them in Arizona and some in New Mexico. This bird has been breeding there, or this pair, or hopefully the same pair, for the last maybe 5 or 6 years at Rio Grande Village over in the area where they flood. And this last year we found him there pretty easily. This pair, they were breeding there. The zone-tail hawk. This one actually was down here at Booty Springs. Deb found it in, I don't know, a couple of years ago. Stayed there for a couple of weeks. But that's a West Texas specialty for the most part. Montezuma quail. Boy, that's a tough bird. This picture is actually taken in New Mexico. And it just accident. We were walking along and I saw something running. I went over. He let me get within 8 or 9, 10 feet of him at the most to get this picture, which is extremely unusual. But they are in the Fort Davis area between the Nature Conservancy property and sometimes over in that private area that you can't get to, where people live, like Lee Hoy and some others. Difficult bird to find. Like I said, I think we drove the road 26 times this last year looking for that bird. Never did see it. Used to come into the park at Davis Mountain State Park, and it does occasionally there, but it's really hit and miss. A scale quail, not so difficult to find. This was down on a South Texas ranch in Aguilares. They pretty little quail though. We call them, when I was hunting birds many years ago, we called them blue quail, but they're really called scale quail. Gambel's quail. Deb luckily got a video of them running across the road when we were at Waco Tanks. This is a kind of a far west Texas specialty. Get on over farther west into New Mexico and Arizona, not as quite as uncommon as they are in far west Texas. These were cute little guys. This is an elf owl. He's very small, probably 6 inches tall. And when we were at in the national park there in Big Bend, we got this guy to come up to us and got these pictures of him, and also got a chance to show him off to some of the neighbors that were nearby there, as well as this western screech owl, who were able to do the same and show him off too. So we were lucky we got both of those owls there one evening when we were camped there. Reveille's hummingbird used to be called Magnificent. It's now called Reveille's, and these are found in Fort Davis area. The Mexican jay, about the only place you're going to find this bird in Texas. They are in Arizona, but about the only place would be on the road up to the campground, sometimes in the campground up at Big Bend in the Chisos Mountains. And I think I took a picture of this bird in Arizona. Now, I'm sorry about the picture, but this is the best one I can have that I could come up with, is a crystal thrasher, which is another specialty of Big Bend and West Texas. This particular bird was found, this particular bird we found in, is it flashing? Oh, this particular bird was in Hudspeth County, driving a back road of the county. But it's got that long, distinct curved bill, and it's got a rusty undertail coverts is the best way to identify. But that bill is pretty distinctive among thrashers. Painted redstart. This can be found up in the Chisos in that, I call it the Death March to Boot Springs. It's there almost every year. This past year, they had a painted redstart, which is a really unusual bird for there, and it was nesting in Big Bend this last year. The hepatic tanager is a specialty of the Davis Mountains and West Texas out there in the Trans-Pecos. Not going to find that. Well, I don't think you're going to find that bird in this side of the Trans-Pecos. Black-chinned sparrow is a specialty up there. We had some last year at a little water tank. I've seen them at Elephant Mountain Wildlife Management Area as well. But they got that little black spot under their chin. Then there's the sage sparrow, which is found in the wintertime out in Hudspeth and El Paso counties primarily, maybe over in, I don't know, I can't think of the other name of the county there by the Guadalupe Mountain National Park, but it's basically a dry thorn scrub sparrow. So finally we get to the hill country, and that's where we have our specialties. The black-capped vireo, which is, this bird is pretty easily found in the spring at Llano River State Park and Junction. That's where this picture was taken. It's there almost every year. Luckily got a good picture of it a couple of years ago. But it is a Texas specialty. It's one that has been managed to try to hold back cowbirds from parasitizing their nests because they were endangered. Now they're doing really well. Same way with this golden cheek warbler, which we're all familiar with around here. I see that really easily out at South Llano State Park the same time that I'm looking for the other one in the spring, early spring. But of course you can find them here at Canyonlands, and actually you find them along the river here at Booty Springs in the years past. So, but it is a Texas specialty. It is the only place that it breeds is within this 200-mile circle that is in our area here. Other than that, it goes back to South America. So there's some additional that we can find in here. I'm going to show you some pictures of them. This upland sandpiper comes through out here in spring migration out at Granger Lake area. I took that picture there this year. Same thing with the American golden plover that are passing through here. The dick thistles breed around here, and they're out there in the Granger area. Scissortail flycatcher, I know none of you have seen them. They're just about everywhere right now. They do go back south in the wintertime. The blue grosbeak is another one of those pretty special birds in Texas, kind of like the painted bunting. Summer tanagers, find these in Booty Springs Park and just about anywhere where you got some trees during the springtime and summer as they're raising their young here. Harris's sparrow, now this is a winter specialty. We get a lot of winter sparrows here in Williamson County. One of my favorites is this Harris's sparrow. It's really a pretty little sparrow with that pink bill and that black face. Fox sparrows we get out at here in Williamson County, out at I can't think of the name of it. Right, it'll come to me. Anyway, sparrows. We'll talk about sparrows this winter when we'll have a field trip out there. Chestnut collared longspurs. These come occasionally into our area out at Granger area, as well as the Lapland longspurs. In winter flocks, they're out there in pretty large number some years. Not every year, and this year they were pretty scarce. Mountain plovers. This bird will drive you nuts trying to find out in the area of the plowed fields out there because it just blends in so well. You know, you're just lucky if you get to see them move, but they're out in the Granger area every year. So some other special areas that we need to look at is East Texas. We haven't looked at all those 1, 2, 1, 5, 6, and whatever. The red cockaded woodpecker is an endangered woodpecker that's found in Angelina National Forest and Sam Houston National Forest. You can find that pretty easily in the Angelina forest if you go out there in winter or right now. Actually, some areas they have it blocked off because they won't let you get in there because they're breeding. The Bachman sparrow, my nemesis bird. Deb and I spent 2 different trips up there. One day we spent a whole week looking for this bird, and everybody was reporting it, but we couldn't find it. So that's the only sparrow left that I haven't seen. Palm warbler is an East Texas specialty. Prairie warbler is an East Texas, pretty much an East Texas specialty. You can only see in the piney woods of East Texas. Swainson's warblers, they breed in the East Texas. Swallowtail kites also breed up in East Texas. One of my favorite kites. Just look, that's a spectacular bird when you see it flying. Okay, so birds of the Panhandle. This was where we went last year because this was wintertime. That's when you go to the Panhandle to look for birds that are special, like rough-legged hawk and Lapland longspur, or lesser prairie chickens are up there. You see those in the spring, but the rest of them you go there in the winter. We had a ferruginous hawk, one of my favorites. We also see those down in South Texas in the winter. Out in the Big Bend too in the winter. Rough-legged hawk, this is kind of a special place to see them. You're not going to see them any place but basically the Panhandle, north of Amarillo during the winter. They come down from the north. The lesser prairie chicken is a spring leks up there. There's a couple of guys that can take you to some private property to see those. Northern shrike, this is about as far south as they get. Very difficult to tell this bird from a regular loggerhead shrikes, which we have many of here in the wintertime. But this bird is a specialty of the Panhandle in the winter. Tundra swans weren't there this year, but they're frequently up there in the Panhandle on the lakes. The birds of the Texas coast, I'm going to just kind of go through this very quickly, because what you have to do to see these birds is to go to the coast between April the 15th and May the 15th and travel from Brownsville to Beaumont, and you will be in some really great migrant warbler species. But in addition, if you're lucky, we weren't lucky to find the Atwater prairie chicken at the preserve. We did find a black rail, which is really kind of a special one. Yellow rails are up there. I have never seen that bird yet. And we had Sprague's pipits, and we had all kinds of warblers in migration. This is a Sprague's pipit at the Aransas National Wildlife, at the Atwater Preserve. Purple gallinule, beautiful bird up along the coast there. This is a migrant, the rose-breasted grosbeak, come through here too. Glossy ibis, we found up that country. Baltimore orioles, of course, they come through here, and there's a pretty bird. Salt marsh sparrow, this is a hard bird to find. We did find this on the Bolivar Peninsula in our big year. Black terns come through along the coast in late spring and inland. So they had a report somewhere up around north of Dallas of some. Chestnut-sided warbler, had lots of those this year down in Corpus. Gray-breasted, we had a few of those. Blackburnian, a beautiful little warbler, had a couple of those. Sanderling, this is kind of unusual. This was on Bolivar, but this is in breeding plumage, and you hardly ever see these birds. They're so nondescript. If you go to the island and just drive, it's all the little birds that are running up and down the beach, running around with the little black legs and just gray. But this is how they get in breeding plumage. Cape May was very cooperative. So hopefully we'll see you along the birding trail, and I hope you've enjoyed this. Gone through it pretty fast. I think Randy is taping it, so if you wanted to check back on some area, I think you could probably do that. And that way I'll turn it back over to Randy.
Actually, you're turning it back over to me.
Oh, okay.
Not a problem.
All
I get to say goodbye unless anybody has questions, and we do have the Q&A section on the webinar there if you want to ask him any questions. We've got a few minutes before 8 o'clock here.
Well, you can send them anytime.
Actually, you've got a question here. Do you have a birding book you would recommend?
There's two different ways that birding books work. One is like drawings, and the other is actual pictures. For drawings, I would say that Birds of North America, National Geographic is the one that I would pick. And for pictures, probably any of Ken Kaufman's books that he does on birds of North America.
Jack Cochran's asking, what impact will the border wall have on some of the Rio Grande Valley species?
That's a good question. It's kind of hard to determine at this point. You remember birds fly, so they can fly over it, or It will probably have more effect on some mammals than it will on birds. I would suspect that most of the birds that would be coming across the Rio Grande are birds that are flying, not walking birds. So it's going to have an impact. If it's like, you know, they did that down at Sable Palms years ago. I haven't been there, but know a lot of people that have. But you go into Sable Palms. I mean, there's a way to get in there. It's just that you just can't walk in there from any direction. They have a gate or an opening that is banned or something. So I really don't know. We'll see, won't we?
I guess so. Well, Linda Lippy sends a thank you so much for the wonderful narrative and beautiful photos, and I echo that. And there are no more questions, so thank you very much. And we will catch everybody in June for the next board meeting. Actually, the membership meeting. Good night, everybody.
Good night.